At a leading tech corporation, a young black man with ambitious dreams of innovation presents his groundbreaking idea to the board of directors, hoping to revolutionize the industry. But his vision is swiftly shut down by the company's chief operating officer, COO, a stubborn, self-serving leader who fears change and refuses to embrace progress. Not only does the COO reject the idea, but he also goes as far as setting the young man up, orchestrating his downfall to have him fired. What COO doesn't realize, however, is that his target is not someone who gives up easily, because this young man is a true genius in the world of technology. Lucas Carter stepped into the towering glass skyscraper of Titan Tech, the company's name gleaming in silver letters across the entrance. He had walked through these doors countless times, but today felt different. There was an uneasy tension in the air, a sense of something brewing beneath the surface. He brushed it off, straightening his suit as he made his way to the executive floor. He had a meeting with the board today, a presentation that could change the future of the company, if they had the foresight to see it. But deep down, he knew the biggest obstacle in the room wouldn't be skepticism or financial concerns, it would be Richard Moore. Richard had despised Lucas from the moment he had joined Titan Tech. It wasn't just the usual workplace rivalry, it was something deeper, more personal. Lucas had learned early on that Richard was the kind of man who saw innovation as a threat, someone who had built his career by playing politics rather than pushing boundaries. But there was another layer to his resentment, one that Lucas had only pieced together over time. Years ago, Richard had sought investment from William Carter, Lucas's father, back when he was trying to launch his own tech startup. William had declined, not out of malice, but because he had seen Richard for what he was, an opportunist with no real vision. That rejection had been a wound to Richard's ego, a scar that never quite healed. And when Lucas, the son of the man who had dismissed him, walked into Titan Tech years later, and started making waves, it was like ripping that scar wide open. Lucas had always downplayed his family name. He wanted to prove himself on his own terms, build his career based on merit, not privilege. So he never spoke about his father, never leveraged his connections. He earned his place at Titan Tech through skill, determination, and a mind that saw beyond the conventional. His passion project, Athena, a groundbreaking AI system that could revolutionize automation and data processing, was proof of that. The potential was limitless. Companies could streamline operations, reduce inefficiencies, and enhance decision-making with unprecedented accuracy. Lucas had spent months refining the concept, perfecting the algorithms, gathering data to demonstrate its capabilities. And now, standing before the board, he was ready to present it. As he clicked through his slides, he could see interest sparking in some of the executives' eyes. They were intrigued, some even excited. But Richard remained stone-faced, his fingers steepled as he leaned back in his chair, waiting. Lucas knew what was coming before the man even opened his mouth. "This is ambitious," Richard said finally, his tone slow, measured, but also impractical. "AI is a buzzword, sure, but let's be real. It's a long way from replacing traditional software solutions. Clients won't trust a fully autonomous system to handle mission-critical operations. They want control. They want reliability. This is a gamble." Lucas held his ground. "It's not a gamble. It's the future. The data backs it up. Athena can improve efficiency by at least 40% across multiple industries. If we move fast, Titan Tech can be the leader in this space. If we don't, someone else will." Richard let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "Let me guess. You think you should be the one leading this initiative. You expect us to pour millions into something unproven just because you believe in it." His voice dripped with condescension. "We're a business, Lucas, not a research lab. We invest in what works, not what might work." Lucas clenched his jaw. He had expected resistance, but the outright dismissal still stung. "With all due respect, Titan Tech has been playing it safe for too long. We have the resources, the talent. What we lack is the willingness to innovate. If we don't adapt, we'll be left behind." Richard's expression hardened. He didn't like being challenged, especially not in front of the board. "Enough," he said, his voice sharp. "We are not moving forward with this. End of discussion." The finality in his tone sent a clear message. This wasn't just about Athena. This was about Lucas. About shutting him down. About making sure he never posed a threat to Richard's control. The meeting adjourned, and Lucas left the boardroom with frustration simmering beneath his skin. He had known convincing them would be difficult, but he hadn't expected outright sabotage. That night, as he sat in his apartment reviewing his notes, an uneasy feeling settled in his gut. Something wasn't right. The next morning, his instincts proved correct. He arrived at the office to find security waiting for him. The atmosphere was thick with tension as he was escorted to a private conference room, where Richard sat with two legal representatives. "Lucas," Richard greeted him with mock concern. "We have a problem." Lucas frowned. "What is this about?" Richard slid a folder across the table. "It has come to our attention that confidential company data has been accessed from your credentials. Data that, curiously, aligns with your AI research. That's a serious breach of our security policies. Some might even call it corporate espionage." Lucas's blood ran cold. He knew exactly what was happening. This was a setup, a calculated move to not only kill Athena but to destroy his credibility, making sure no other company would ever touch him. "This is ridiculous," Lucas said, keeping his voice steady. "I've never stolen anything. If you check the logs." "We have," Richard interrupted smoothly. "And the evidence is unfortunate. Given the circumstances, the board has decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately." Lucas felt the weight of the words settle on him. He wanted to argue, to fight, but he could see it in Richard's eyes. This was already decided. The moment he had stepped into that meeting yesterday, this outcome had been inevitable. Security escorted him out of the building, past co-workers who either looked away in awkward silence or whispered behind his back. The humiliation burned. He had walked in as a visionary and was leaving as a disgrace. As the glass doors closed behind him, he stood there for a long moment, the weight of betrayal pressing down on his chest. But then something shifted. Beneath the anger, beneath the sense of loss, a new resolve took root. They thought they had buried him. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming next. Lucas sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mind was a battlefield of emotions: anger, humiliation, disbelief. He replayed every moment in that conference room, every smug word from Richard, every condescending glance. The bastard had planned this, executed it flawlessly, and now, as far as the world was concerned, Lucas Carter was nothing more than a disgraced ex-employee with a tarnished reputation. But Richard had made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated Lucas. The drive to his father's estate felt longer than usual. He barely registered the cityscape giving way to rolling hills, the towering glass skyscrapers replaced by the sprawling mansion that sat like a fortress on the outskirts of town. The Carter estate had always felt like another world, a place of power, influence, and wealth. Lucas had spent years distancing himself from it, wanting to carve his own path, to prove he could succeed without his father's name. But tonight, he wasn't here as the independent entrepreneur trying to make it on his own. He was here as a man who had been backed into a corner, and there was only one person who could help him fight back. William Carter was waiting for him in his study, a glass of bourbon in hand, his piercing gray eyes scanning his son the moment he walked through the door. There was no need for pleasantries. William had already heard what had happened. News traveled fast in their circles, especially when it involved a Carter. Lucas sank into the leather chair opposite his father, exhaling sharply. "They set me up," he said, voice tight. "Richard made sure I was blacklisted before I even walked out of that building." William took a slow sip of his drink, his expression unreadable. "Did you expect anything less?" Lucas frowned. "I expected a fight. I expected resistance. But this—" he shook his head. "They didn't just kill my project, they tried to kill my future." His father set his glass down, leaning forward. "Then why are you sitting here like you've already lost?" Lucas met his gaze, something shifting inside him. He hadn't lost. He had been blindsided, but he was still standing. The difference between him and Richard was that Richard only knew how to destroy. Lucas knew how to build. William studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly, as if making a decision. "You wanted to prove yourself without my help. I respected that. But there comes a time when even the smartest men realize power is a currency, and if you don't use it, someone else will." He leaned back, his voice cool, calculated. "So tell me, what do you need?" Lucas didn't hesitate. "Funding. Enough to start my own company. Enough to make sure Titan Tech regrets every single decision they made today." A slow smile tugged at the corner of William's lips. "Now that," he said, "is the kind of Carter thinking I like to see." Within a week, the foundation of Nova Innovations was laid. William provided the capital, $500 million to get started, but Lucas was the one calling the shots. He didn't just want revenge. He wanted to create something Titan Tech would never be able to compete with. He reached out to the best engineers, data scientists, and AI specialists, recruiting those whom Titan Tech had overlooked, undervalued, or forced out. Some of them had once worked under Richard Moore, dismissed for being too ambitious or for pushing ideas that clashed with the company's outdated vision. They were exactly the kind of people Lucas needed. The first 6 months were brutal. Lucas worked relentlessly, sleeping in his office more nights than not, poring over lines of code, refining algorithms, and ensuring that Nova's AI technology would be leagues ahead of anything the industry had seen. Athena 2.0, as he called it, wasn't just an update of his original Titan Tech project. It was an entirely new system, capable of deep learning adaptation, predictive modeling, and autonomous decision-making with unprecedented accuracy. More than that, it had the potential to integrate seamlessly across industries, finance, healthcare, cybersecurity, even space exploration. Word spread fast. Investors took notice. What had started as whispers about Carter's comeback quickly turned into a full-blown media frenzy. Nova Innovations was Silicon Valley's rising star, and Lucas Carter was the man at the center of it all. By the end of year one, Nova had raised over $1 billion in additional funding, partnered with several Fortune 500 companies, and was already valued at $4 billion. Meanwhile, Titan Tech was struggling. Without Athena, the company was falling behind its competitors. Clients who had been with them for years began shifting to AI-integrated solutions, leaving Titan scrambling to keep up. Richard Moore, who had once ruled over the boardroom with absolute confidence, now found himself in damage control mode, desperately trying to push new projects to compensate for the gaping hole Lucas had left behind. But the problem was, Titan Tech had nothing innovative to offer. And worse, Nova's success had made it painfully clear that Lucas had been right all along. 2 years after being thrown out of Titan Tech, like a criminal, Lucas stood in the center of Nova's gleaming new headquarters, watching the sunset through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office. His company was no longer a startup, it was a juggernaut. AI Athena had disrupted the industry in ways no one had anticipated, reshaping entire sectors and proving that artificial intelligence wasn't just a trend, it was the future. Titan Tech's stock had plummeted by 30%, and investors were restless. The company was no longer a leader, no longer a symbol of innovation. It was a relic, desperately clinging to its past glory while the world moved forward without it. And Lucas, he wasn't done yet. With his father's help, he had slowly but steadily acquired stock in Titan Tech, buying up shares through intermediaries until he owned a 40% stake in the company. It was a strategic move, one that put him in a position of power without alerting Richard or the other board members, until now. The meeting was set, a shareholder vote, and for the first time in 2 years, Lucas would be walking back into Titan Tech, not as an employee, but as a man with the authority to decide its fate. As he adjusted the cuffs of his suit, preparing for what was to come, he allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. They had tried to bury him. They didn't realize he was a seed. The boardroom of Titan Tech was just as Lucas remembered it, sleek, imposing, a room designed to intimidate. But today, he felt nothing. He strode in with calculated ease, the soft click of his Italian leather shoes echoing through the marble floors as he took his seat at the long conference table. The other board members were already present, a mix of old faces and new ones, some watching him with curiosity, others with veiled apprehension. They all knew why they were here. This wasn't just a routine shareholder meeting. This was a reckoning. Richard Moore sat at the head of the table, his once unshakable confidence replaced with a brittle edge of desperation. He still carried himself with authority, but Lucas could see the tension in the way he adjusted his cufflinks, the way his jaw tightened as he glanced around the room. He was losing control, and he knew it. "Gentlemen," Richard began, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "before we begin, let me remind everyone that Titan Tech has always been a company driven by resilience. Yes, we've had challenges, but we are still one of the most powerful players in the industry. And today we're here to discuss our path forward. Lucas let the words hang in the air for a moment before leaning back in his chair, his fingers tapping idly against the polished surface of the table. A path forward, he echoed, his voice smooth, deliberate. That's an interesting choice of words, Richard. But tell me, which direction are we going? Because from where I'm sitting, Titan Tech has been in freefall for the past 2 years. A murmur rippled through the room. Richard's eyes darkened. We're in a period of restructuring, he countered. Every company goes through phases of adaptation. We're implementing new initiatives. New initiatives? Lucas interrupted, tilting his head slightly. You mean the rushed, half-baked projects you greenlit in an attempt to salvage what was left of your credibility? The ones investors refused to back because they lacked vision? Or are you talking about the knee-jerk cost-cutting measures that resulted in Titan teaming some of its top engineers to competitors like Nova Innovations? Richard's knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrest of his chair. We are in the process of pivoting our strategy. Lucas smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that carried the weight of a man who had already won the game while his opponent was still scrambling to make a move. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a thick dossier, and placed it on the table. Let's cut the bullshit, Richard. This isn't a period of restructuring. It's a crisis of leadership. Titan Tech's stock has dropped 30% in 2 years. Key investors are pulling out. Clients are leaving. And the reason? You. Richard opened his mouth to retort, but Lucas held up a hand, silencing him. I've spent the last 2 years watching you run this company into the ground. You dismissed AI as a fad. You sabotaged the one project that could have kept Titan Tech ahead of the curve. And when you couldn't see the future, you did what cowards do. You eliminated the competition. Me. Silence fell over the room. No one dared to look at Richard. They all knew the truth, but until now, no one had dared to say it out loud. Lucas let the moment stretch, then flipped open the dossier. This, he said, tapping a page, is a shareholder proposal. Effective immediately, I am calling for a vote of no confidence against Richard Moore. And I am not just suggesting his removal as COO. I am demanding it. The room erupted into whispers. Richard paled, his hands clenching into fists as he looked around, searching for support. But it wasn't there. Not anymore. One of the senior board members, a man named Howard Stern, cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, he said carefully, you own a significant portion of Titan Tech, but this is a drastic step. Are you certain this is the best course of action? Lucas met his gaze unflinching. Howard, do you think Titan Tech can survive another year under Richard's leadership? Because from where I'm sitting, the company is already circling the drain. The market has moved on. AI is the future, and we are 2 years behind because of one man's incompetence. I won't stand by and watch Titan Tech become obsolete. Howard hesitated, then gave a slow nod. Across the table, other members exchanged uncertain glances. Some had been loyal to Richard for years, but loyalty meant nothing in the face of sinking profits and plummeting stock prices. Richard finally found his voice, though it was laced with barely concealed fury. You think you can just waltz in here and take over? He scoffed. You think the board is going to hand this company over to you? Lucas leaned forward, his expression deadly calm. I don't think, Richard. I know. And then he dropped the final bombshell. I now control 40% of Titan Tech's stock. A collective gasp swept through the room. Even Richard, for all his arrogance, looked momentarily stunned. That's not possible. Lucas arched a brow. It is when you know how to play the long game. He let the words sink in before continuing. For the past 2 years, I've been acquiring shares through intermediaries, through silent investors. Piece by piece, I built my position. And as of this morning, I am the largest single shareholder in this company. Panic flickered in Richard's eyes. He turned to the other board members. You can't let him do this. He's an outsider. A disruptor. He's right, Howard Stern cut in, his voice firm. Titan Tech is failing. And we need leadership that can take us into the future. Another board member nodded. We've lost too much under your leadership, Richard. It's time for a change. One by one, heads turned toward Lucas. Richard's face twisted with fury. You son of a... Careful, Lucas warned, his voice ice. You're still technically in that chair. For now. The vote was cast. Richard Moore was removed as COO of Titan Tech. As security escorted him out, Lucas watched, his expression unreadable. 2 years ago, Richard had orchestrated his downfall, had him thrown out of this very building like a criminal. Now, the tables had turned. But Lucas wasn't just here to get revenge. He was here to rebuild, to take Titan Tech into a new era. As he stood at the head of the table, the boardroom was silent, all eyes on him. He allowed himself one final glance at the empty seat where Richard had once sat, then turned to the board, his voice steady. Let's get to work. The weight of what had just happened settled over the room like a thick fog. Lucas stood at the head of the table, feeling the gravity of the moment, the culmination of 2 years of meticulous planning, calculated risks, and sheer willpower. The man who had once orchestrated his downfall was gone, and in his place, Lucas now held the reins of the very empire that had sought to bury him. But he wasn't here just to claim victory, he was here to rebuild. And he would do it the only way he knew how, by dragging Titan Tech into the future, whether the old guard liked it or not. He turned to face the board, his expression calm, unreadable. The silence in the room was deafening, a sharp contrast to the chaos that had erupted just moments before. He could see the uncertainty in their eyes, some still wary of his sudden rise to power, others cautiously hopeful. He couldn't afford to let them hesitate. Hesitation was what had led Titan Tech to the brink of collapse. Let's talk about what happens next, Lucas said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Titan Tech has been bleeding out for 2 years, and we all know why. Stagnation, complacency, fear of innovation. That ends today. Howard Stern, the board member who had supported his motion, cleared his throat. You've made your point, Lucas, but you're asking us to pivot an entire corporation overnight. This isn't Nova Innovations. Titan Tech is massive. Change at this scale takes time. Lucas didn't blink. Time is the one thing we don't have, Howard. Every day we delay is another day we lose market share, another day investors lose faith, another day Nova pulls ahead. I'm not suggesting a slow pivot. I'm demanding a full-scale transformation. Murmurs rippled through the room, a mix of skepticism and reluctant agreement. One of the older board members, a man who had been with Titan Tech since its inception, leaned forward, his fingers tapping against the table. And how do you propose we do that? Lucas exhaled slowly, then pulled a sleek, black folder from his briefcase and placed it in front of him. We start by doing what should have been done 2 years ago. Titan Tech is integrating AI into every facet of its operations. We're not just adopting Athena, we're expanding it, evolving it beyond what Nova Innovations has already built. This isn't just about keeping up. It's about taking back the lead. A few board members exchanged glances, uneasy but intrigued. Lucas knew what they were thinking. 2 years ago, they had dismissed AI as a passing trend, something that wouldn't hold long-term value. Now, with Nova dominating the industry and Titan Tech struggling to stay relevant, they had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Lucas had been right all along. Howard frowned slightly, his fingers steepling under his chin. And what about Nova? You built that company from the ground up. You own it. Are we supposed to believe you're going to shift your full focus here while your other company thrives? Lucas met his gaze evenly. I built Nova to prove a point. That point has been made. My stake in Nova remains intact. But Titan Tech is my priority now. And let's be clear, this isn't about me choosing one over the other. It's about merging strengths. We don't need to compete. We can align. A younger board member, one who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. You're talking about an acquisition. Lucas nodded. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The murmurs grew louder. An acquisition of Nova Innovations was a bold move, risky, aggressive, but potentially revolutionary. It would bring the best of both companies under one roof, giving Titan Tech access to the cutting-edge AI research that had made Nova the industry leader. It would be the ultimate power shift, a reversal of fortunes that no one would have predicted 2 years ago. Howard looked at him carefully. You think Nova's board will agree to that? Lucas smirked. I don't need their agreement. I own the majority stake. The decision is mine. Silence. Then, slowly, Howard nodded. Then let's get to work. The next 6 months were the most grueling, high-stakes period Titan Tech had ever faced. The acquisition of Nova was finalized in record time, sending shockwaves through the industry. Analysts called it one of the most unexpected corporate maneuvers of the decade, a company that had once dismissed AI as an afterthought now betting its entire future on it. Investors were divided at first, wary of such a rapid transformation, but as the integration unfolded, the results spoke for themselves. Lucas oversaw every detail, working around the clock to ensure the transition was seamless. He brought in the brightest minds from Nova, placing them in key positions within Titan Tech. He dismantled the outdated bureaucracy that had plagued the company for years, eliminating inefficiencies, cutting dead weight. Departments that had resisted innovation were either restructured or removed entirely. Employees who had once followed Richard Moore's outdated philosophies found themselves either adapting or being shown the door. The culture of fear and stagnation that had taken root under Richard's rule was erased, replaced with something entirely new, something bold, forward-thinking, relentless. And the numbers reflected it. Within a year, Titan Tech's stock rebounded, then soared. AI Athena was no longer just a product, it was the core of the company, deployed across multiple industries, reshaping the landscape of automation and intelligent systems. The same clients who had once left were now returning, eager to be part of the future Titan Tech was creating. Lucas rarely thought about Richard Moore anymore. The man had disappeared from the public eye, a relic of a past that no longer mattered. But one day, in the midst of back-to-back meetings, his assistant placed a file on his desk. "Thought you might want to see this," she said, amusement flickering in her tone. Lucas glanced down. It was a news article, buried deep in the business section. Richard Moore, former Titan Tech COO, joins small consultancy firm. For a moment, Lucas just stared at it. Then, slowly, he leaned back in his chair, exhaling a quiet, satisfied breath. He didn't need revenge. This was enough. He had built. Richard had destroyed. And in the end, the future had chosen its side. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.